Hello, welcome to Weekly Videos with Kirsten. My name is Kirsten, and in today's weekly video, we are going to talk about something that is often very difficult for me to, not very difficult, but it can often be challenging for me to talk about in the moment when I'm meeting someone for the first time, and that is what I do for work. Now, I often say that I'm a writer, I'm a freelance writer. I'll sometimes go into a little bit more detail and say oh, I write about travel and personal finance, which of the things are true. But there's often so much more that goes into my work as a writer that I don't often share. And one of the reasons why I'm doing this video is to share more about what it is like being a writer. And in other videos, I definitely want to talk more about what it is like being a writer in the world of AI and what that is like. But for now, I want to just start by focusing it in on one small aspect of being a writer, of my journey as a writer, is writing editorials or writing for publications. So it's actually how I got started writing. Actually, I would say I got started writing first, writing blogs and then writing editorials. I think those kind of happened. No. I think the editorial was first. Now that I think about it. So, what is an editorial? An editorial pretty much is an article written for a publication, and it can vary to be like an opinion piece. Sometimes editorials are put in more of opinions. Sometimes editorials are talking about a personal experience or a moment in someone's life. Sometimes it's more in-depth, sometimes it's a criticism. It can kind of vary, but I think the common thread between editorials, beside it being for a publication, it usually has some relevance on what is happening in the real world, what is currently happening. It doesn't mean it has to be a newsworthy piece. It can sometimes be a newsworthy piece, but it's more so something that can be relatable, and it can be something that's evergreen. I write a lot of evergreen content, and evergreen content is pretty much content that is somewhat timeless. That means I can write a piece now and it can still be relevant a year from now, 5 years from now, etc. So a lot of my editorials that I've written have been about my personal experience, about moving abroad, about living abroad, and and also about on travel. I've also written editorials about personal finance. I've written editorials about lifestyle pieces, and most recently, I've been doing a lot more featured pieces where I interview someone, I've interviewed influencers, I've interviewed talk show hosts and or entertainers. I've interviewed influencers and entertainers, and I write about their journey into how they got started into their career, about their life, and I write a featured article about them for a publication, and it benefits the publication because now they can bring in the audience of that person to read that article, and also it benefits the person who is getting featured because then it opens them up to the new audience that the publication or magazine already has. So I think one of the first publications that I wrote for was Travel Noir. The article is no longer published. Because I wrote it right before I moved to Spain, I believe. Yeah, so almost 7 years ago. So sometimes editorials will have a lifespan of many years, and sometimes they might have a shorter lifespan, just depending on the publication, depending on the publication. I will say that I've done mostly online publications, online editorials. There are editorials and there are print magazines too. I haven't had that much experience writing for a print magazine, mostly for online. And I started with Travel Noir. I started talking about my experience living in Panama. My second year in Panama, I lived with a salary of $600 or $700, and how that was affordable and how I was able to do that. And so that was kind of my first break into editorial writing. And then from there, I think I did like kind of one-off assignments here and there. I did when I was in Panama. Oh yeah, so when I was in Panama, actually the first kind of one of my first published pieces was for a blog about Panama, and I wrote about my experience living in Playa Manao. And then after that, my first like big publication, so my first paid publication was for Travel Noir. And I really love writing editorials because I often get to share my experience, and I often get to talk about different aspects of life. I've written I think over 100 editorials for Black Girl Nerds, and that was really exciting period in my time to write on various topics. I wrote a lot of Black history, a lot of profile pieces. I wrote pieces about travel, about personal finance. So it was really nice to have that range. And right now, a lot of my editorials focus on travel, living abroad, and features, where I interview different people of interest. I've interviewed quite a handful of influencers to talk about how they have grown their online business and how they kind of reached this kind of internet fame. So I will say that when it comes to a business, like where editorials kind of live in the ecosystem of my business, I will say that it is a smaller portion of my business because, in all honesty, some editorials can pay well, but I think that editorials they were such a great way for me to help jumpstart my business. One, because it helped me get exposure, it helps me get credibility, because I wrote for these well-known publications. And it's also great, to have a little bit extra money as you write for bigger publications. Sometimes, pays can range from $100 to $300 USD, usually in that range. Around, I think 200 is probably about the average that I've seen, and some can even go higher. So it's a nice like extra side money, but it's not always super dependable, because one, it takes a lot of effort because you have to pitch. And pitching is pretty much when you write your idea about what you want to write, you kind of outline it, you kind of say why you're the person to write the story, and you send it to an editor. And the challenge with that, the first challenge is coming with the idea and formatting it and making it relevant, and then the second challenge is actually reaching the editor, because editors get hundreds of emails a day. And so I've often had, to resend and follow up on editorials. I've often had to, I think one time I got a pitch accepted, a story accepted, like 4 months after I sent the initial email. So it can be time consuming, and it can be something that you have to be very patient with, but it is really great when you see your work published. Also, I think it's helped me grow as a writer, because I've worked with different editors and I've gotten their feedback on my work and have adapted, how my writing style is. I've improved my writing style, I think, because I've worked with different editors. So it is something that I continue to pursue. Because again, it is more exposure. It exposes me to bigger audiences. It builds up my credibility, but it is not something that is a large part of the ecosystem of my business. It's not where I put, a large amount of my time with. It is also nice too, because writing editorials has allowed me to go on press trips, which I'll do another video about that. But yeah, so that is a little bit of what I do, and in the subsequent videos, I will share a little bit more about the other parts of my business, and what that looks like, and also how my business has expanded into more client work and sales and virtual assistant work as well.